Mandatory OTAs wrapped up on Wednesday. What did we learn? And I have some thoughts to share on Jordan Poyer's contract situation. We're going to break it all down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Use code Locked On at checkout. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. The Buffalo Bills wrapped up mandatory OTAs on Wednesday afternoon, and so we have one final practice to recap and talk about the big takeaways in terms of what was reported, and we're going to do that in the first two segments today. We'll talk mostly about defense in the first segment. We're going to talk mostly about offense in the second segment. And then in segment 3 today, I have some thoughts to share about Jordan Poyer's contract situation. And those thoughts are rooted in Minkah Fitzpatrick getting his contract extension on Wednesday, and a lot of chatter about how that could impact the Jordan Poyer negotiations. And I have some things I want to say about that. So please don't miss our third segment today. I think it's going to be really good. But let's start with what we learned from mandatory OTAs on Wednesday. And again, I want to start with the offense. But I guess before we get to the offense, let's talk about participation. Nothing surprising here. Spencer Brown did not participate, as well as Tim Harris, Trey White, and Ike Bacher. The good news is Jake Kumerow practiced in full. So Spencer Brown basically didn't practice at all this offseason. And I am not taking that lightly, because we've sat here and talked about Cody Ford. We've sat here and talked about Zach Moss and how it's been challenging for them to acclimate to the NFL because they've been injured during off seasons. Well, here Spencer Brown is entering his second season, and he hasn't practiced all off season long. Had a procedure. We don't really know the status, but he hasn't gotten any reps, and all those reps have gone to David Quessenberry, who had a really good season for the Titans last year at right tackle. So that's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Moving on to the defense. This comes courtesy of a video posted on Twitter from Amy Holder. And it was just the Bills' defensive line going through drills. And I couldn't help but notice the collection of players that were part of the first group defensive line. And it's not that this is unexpected or anything like that, but you know me, I'm scouring for every bit of information I can get to learn and, craft our thoughts about this team. And so the first team defensive line from this video was Gregory Rousseau at left end, Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver as the defensive tackles, and Von Miller as the right end. And so there's been a lot of conversation about Greg Rousseau and Von Miller both being left side players. And as I kind of suspected, Von Miller is going to be the guy that gets the run to play on the other side. And I'm sure the Bills will play matchups a lot and move Von Miller around and really try to get him some great opportunities to attack the pocket and disrupt and get after the quarterback. But I think the traditional look for this defense is going to be Rousseau at left end, Von Miller at right end, with your defensive tackles being at Oliver and Daquan Jones. And I don't know if maybe some were expecting Tim Settle or Jordan Phillips to be the one technique. I mean, you could look at the contracts and understand that Daquan Jones was signed to be the Bills starting one tech. So a bit of confirmation, but also, just some clarity on what that looks like at this point. The next thing that I want to get into is Kaiir Elam. And this is the practice report we've been waiting for. Some really positive buzz about Kaiir Elam, where it's not that there's been anything negative, but there's been positive remarks about the way he's worked and approached everything. A lot of good moments, but, kind of up and down, trying to find consistency like any other rookie. Sounds like he had himself a good day on Wednesday. And in both Matt Perino's practice recap and Sal Capaccio's practice recap, they talked about Kaiir Elam having a strong practice and actually picking off Josh Allen. Let me read to you from Matt Perino's observations, his description of the interception. He said Josh Allen went back to pass and thought Jamison Crowder was going to run down the left sideline, but the slot receiver stopped. Elam immediately recognized the miscommunication and sprinted toward the ball and came down with the interception and got both feet inbounds as he tumbled to the ground. Elam looks more comfortable on the field every day. Elam looks more comfortable on the field every day we've seen him during the spring. This is what you saw on tape at Florida. Ball skills. The ability to come off landmarks and make plays on the ball. He's got a really astute ability to cue the backfield and work into throwing lanes. And I saw him at Florida come off landmarks and adjust and understand when to do that and go make a play on the ball. It's one of my favorite things about Kaiir Elam. And I love to hear that it showed up in practice on Wednesday. Too often, and I scout players all the time. I'm writing up several corners right now for the 2023 NFL draft. And I can't tell you how many times I write down things like they lack good zone coverage awareness and an understanding of when to adjust their landmarks. You don't want to cover grass. Don't cover grass if you're in zone coverage. You have to understand the eligible receivers. You have to understand the splits and the alignments and what the early route combinations tell you. And you can work as a corner through process of elimination and understand where to be and where not to be. Kaiir Elam shows that. And that's something that you see from Trey White all the time, which is why I found this quote from Micah Hyde on Kaiir Elam very, very interesting. This was from yesterday. Micah Hyde said this regarding Kaiir Elam, quote, "You can already tell he just listens. He pays attention. I don't necessarily who he was coached by, his upbringing and all that type of stuff, but they definitely taught him well, coached him well because he's all ears. You can tell as I'm saying stuff, he's making mental notes. That's how Tre'Davious White was when he first got here. He was battling on the football field, which K is doing, but also just learning from his mistakes and learning from the older guys." That's what you want to hear. That's what you want to hear regarding your first-round pick that you expect to be an impact starter early in his career, playing opposite of an all-pro corner in Tre'Davious White. That's what you're hoping to hear for a guy that you feel like can elevate what you received from Levi Wallace. Very excited about Kaiir Elam, and this practice on Wednesday increases that enthusiasm. Matt Marino also commented on Cam Lewis having a strong practice. And I couldn't help but notice in Perino's practice observations that he nearly had a pass breakup against Josh Allen and noted reps covering Gabriel Davis, Stefon Diggs, and Dawson Knox. What does that tell you? You guys know where I'm going to go with this. That tells you that Cam Lewis is getting first-team reps. And that's significant because Dane Jackson's out there, and Kyer Elam is out there, and Taron Johnson is out there. But you heard Sean McDermott mention yesterday during his press conference that Kyer Elam was getting reps with the first and second team. Well, it sounds like the guy that is stepping in and getting those opportunities when Kyer is running with the second team is Cam Lewis. And so that bodes very, very well for Cam Lewis and the path that he's on and the chance that he'll make this team. Now, he's been a practice squad player. He's had some call-ups over the last few years. But this could be his best opportunity to really showcase himself. And so while Tre'Davious White and his status is very much up in the air for week one, it sounds like the Bills are getting some really good contributions from Dane Jackson, from Cam Lewis, from Kyer Elam, in addition to what we already know about in terms of back seven guys with Taron Johnson and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So this corner situation is very, very interesting to me. And I love hearing that Cam Lewis is finding his way out there. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. You can build the engagement ring of her dreams. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Then Blue Nile's bench jewelers will handcraft her perfect engagement ring, making sure that each ring is one of a kind. Or you can celebrate life's special moments with fine jewelry. And look, maybe you're trying to find some fine jewelry, but you're having a difficult time choosing. You're in luck because Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. So let's talk a little bit more about the offensive side of the football here in this segment. And a lot of this discussion is going to be centered around wide receivers and running backs because that's what we're getting the most from, right? And that makes sense. I mean, there's no pads, there's no contact. Trench play is hard to really gain meaningful takeaways from. You're seeing wide receivers go up against DBs. You're seeing running backs catch passes, that type of stuff. That's why you're not hearing about linebackers. Linebackers are not playing downhill and making tackles in OTA practices. So I'm not surprised that this has been a lot of DB, cornerback, wide receiver, running back conversation. But it feels like everything that I read, and this includes Joe Buscalia's observations, Matt Perino's, and even Sal Capaccio today, you're just seeing more and more positive remarks regarding Tavon Austin and how he's acclimating himself very, very quickly to this team. And you continue to hear positive remarks about Josh Allen and how good he's looking. Stefon Diggs, Sal Capaccio wrote about that. I mean, not that we would expect anything different than Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen being on the same page and, connecting to all levels of the field. But, I mean, this is exciting. We're talking about year 3 of these two guys. Positive remarks about Jamison Crowder, Gabriel Davis. Bills wide receiver room's in good shape. Real good shape. And it's very interesting to me what the Bills are going to do here because they can't keep them all. Now, injuries could change things very quickly. But the Bills have typically kept 6 receivers. Sean McDermott hinted at keeping 5, 6, or 7. I don't think 5 is going to happen. No way. I think it's more of a 6 or 7, and this could be the year that they're kind of forced to keep 7. Stefon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Jamison Crowder, Jake Kumerow. Don't scoff at Jake Kumerow. This guy's making the team. He's a core special teamer. And he offers a size dynamic that's really not replicated in this receiver core outside of Gabriel Davis. Isaiah McKenzie, Tavon Austin, Khalil Shakur. That's 7 right there. Diggs, Davis, Crowder, Kumaro, McKenzie, Austin, Shakir. I think Marquez Stevenson's on the outside looking in. Isaiah Hodgin got a tough climb to make this roster. Tanner Gentry, tough climb to make this roster. But the more I think about it, I think this is a situation where you just kind of have to keep 7. Now, maybe an injury will happen and this becomes very simple, but bumping one of those 7 guys off is going to be real tough because you can see how they can all help you, right? Diggs is your number 1 guy. Davis is your number 2 guy. Crowder's your featured slot guy. Kumaro gives you size, blocking ability, and special teams. McKenzie has some return ability, some gadgety type stuff, but you love his route running against man coverage. Tavon Austin, a guy that can play on the outside and in the slot, can do gadgety things and gives you return ability. And then Khalil Shakir, a rookie who we're very excited about. I think there's a spot for all these guys. Moving on from the wide receiver conversation, Sal Capaccio commented on how explosive James Cook is with the ball in his hands. And then in listening to Ryan Talbot and Matt Marino on the Shout Buffalo football podcast, they offered praise for not just James Cook, but also Devin Singletary and even Zach Moss. And I've talked about Zach Moss and how he's the one guy on here that's this 220-plus pound back that gives you a downhill type of skill set. And he's had a tough go here his first couple of seasons because he's just been injured like crazy. Now he's kind of always been injured, but maybe in a very limited role as a third running back, he can help this team. I do find it interesting that in all this conversation about James Cook and Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, have not heard a peep about Duke Johnson. Not a peep. And so it sounds like Duke Johnson's probably going to need Moss, Singletary, or Cook to get injured to make this team. And that shouldn't surprise anyone. I know that Duke Johnson is an appealing player who's had production in the NFL before, but this guy was just sitting on the street for most of the year last year, and then Miami brought him in, and he played like in 4 games. So Duke Johnson, no buzz whatsoever around him. And when you think about that combined with, just his trajectory in last year, Duke might have a hard time sticking if nobody gets hurt. The last thing I'll say here in this segment is that the Bills were scheduled to have 3 days of mandatory OTAs. Sean McDermott cut that short, which is, I think, been the case every year under McDermott. They schedule 3 days of mandatory OTAs, and then they get done after 2. And so the Bills are off until training camp when they report to St. John Fisher in Rochester. And the date that they can report is July 23rd. I don't know if that's going to be the date. I would suspect that it is. But we're all still waiting on that training camp schedule. And I've been waiting on it because I want to plan my trip. I'm definitely coming up, and I'm going to be at camp for a bit. And I need to know when it is so I can plan my itinerary. So, Sean McDermott, if you're listening to this podcast, my guy, please announce the schedule so that we can make our plans. You know how our friends at Built are always coming out with amazing new flavors? Well, this time Built has truly outdone themselves with their new Mud Pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing the Mud Pie flavor in both Mud Pie Bar and Mud Pie Puff. Not sure what Mud Pie tastes like? Well, if you're a chocolate fan, you'd better sit down for this. The new Mud Pie Bar is rich whipped cream and chocolate mousse smothered in 100% real chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. I had one today. It is friggin' good. You got to try this thing as soon as possible. And you need to hurry because the Mud Pie Bar and the Mud Pie Puff are only available for a limited time. Visit Built.com to taste the deliciousness for yourself. Well, if you're not convinced, you're in luck because we saved the best for last. It's actually good for you because all Built products are good for you. They're low calorie, high protein, and low in sugar. Try these things now. Head on over to Built.com. We have a deal for you. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Let's talk about Jordan Poyer and his contract situation. Minkah Fitzpatrick, stud safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers, signed a big contract extension on Wednesday. 4 years, $18.4 million per season, $36 million guaranteed. He's now the highest paid safety in the history of the NFL. 25 years old. And when this news came through, I saw a lot of Bills people mentioning it, right? And I think it's worth mentioning. The Bills have a safety that is one of the elite players at his position in the NFL that wants a new contract and, hasn't showed up all off season as he's sending the message that he wants a new deal. I don't think Minkah Fitzpatrick's contract has much implications on Jordan Poyer. And I'll say this, I'm going to get into the weeds here a little bit, and I could be wrong, but I think my process is good here. Jordan Poyer's not going to get $18.4 million at 31 years old. That's not going to happen per season. Jordan Poyer is playing currently on the second year of a 2-year, $19.5 million contract. $9.75 million in average annual value. Jordan Poyer is the 14th highest paid safety in the NFL right now. Now, the safety market has flipped a lot. There's been a lot of movement in the safety market. Budda Baker, Justin Simmons, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Stefon Diggs. A lot of guys have signed new deals. Right now in the NFL, 13 safeties are making above $10 million on average per season. 13. But I don't look at the Minkah Fitzpatrick extension as the framework for Jordan Poyer. Not at all. Now, 2 recent contracts do give us a bit of a framework, and that's Stefon Diggs for the Seattle Seahawks, 29 years old. He signed a 3-year, $39 million deal. But the one that I want to focus in on is Tyrann Mathieu with the New Orleans Saints. He signed a 3-year, $28.3 million deal just a couple weeks ago with the Saints. $9.4 million average annual value. To me, that's very, very, very surprising. Excuse me. Tyrann Mathieu signed a deal for a lower AAV in this offseason than Jordan Poyer did, and is now upset about what he's getting paid, feeling like he's severely underpaid. Needs a new deal. But Tyrann Mathieu just signed a 3-year, $28.3 million deal. Tyrann Mathieu is 30 years old, 1 year younger than Jordan Poyer. Tyrann Mathieu is a 3-time first-team All-Pro. In 2015, 2019, and 2020, he was an All-Pro, first team. In 2021, he was a Pro Bowler. So over the last 3 seasons, I'm not talking about the entire career of either player, just the last 3 seasons, Tyrann Mathieu has been a first-team All-Pro in 2 of those seasons and a Pro Bowler in the other one. He's a member of the 2010s NFL All-Decade team. One of the best safeties of our time here, right? He just signed for 3 years, $28 million, $9.4 million average annual value. He's 1 year younger than Jordan Poyer. If I'm the Bills, that's in my pocket. That's the one I'm talking about. And what's really weird here is that deal is literally lower than what Jordan Poyer signed a couple years ago with this 2-year, $19.5 million contract extension that he's entering year 2 of. Let's compare. I've already went through. You guys know that Poyer, first-team All-Pro this past year. That's the only time he's ever been an All-Pro, and he's never been a Pro Bowler. So again, those accolades don't really stack up. They favor Mathieu very much. And maybe you're sitting here saying, well, Pro Bowls and All-Pros, like that doesn't matter. maybe it doesn't matter, but for contract negotiations, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Again, Matthew, 1 year younger than Jordan Poyer. Now let's look at some of their statistical comparisons over the last 3 seasons. Interceptions over the last 3 seasons combined. Jordan Poyer, 9. Tyrann Mathieu, 13. Pass breakups. Jordan Poyer, 17. Tyrann Mathieu, 27. Decided advantage for Mathieu. In fact, I mean, they played basically the same amount of games over the last 3 seasons. Mathieu has 4 more interceptions and 10 more pass breakups. That's a season's worth of production on the ball. Now, here's where Poyer has them. Forced fumbles. Jordan Poyer has 5. Mathieu has 0. They both have exactly 4 fumble recoveries. Jordan Poyer has 6 sacks to Mathieu's 3. Jordan Poyer has 228 tackles, 16 tackles for loss. Mathieu has 171 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. So while Poyer has the tackle numbers and 3 more sacks, the ball production and the recognition belongs to Mathieu. And again, Mathieu just signed 3 years, $28.3 million. And Jordan Poyer is not satisfied with 2 years, 19.5. Where does this fall? What is the number that gets this done for Jordan Poyer? To me, it's $12.5 million. That's my guess. If you give Jordan Poyer, if you say 2 years, $25 million with a significant amount of that guaranteed, maybe give him a little bump this year with some of your cap space, does that get it done? I struggle here to find, or not to find, but to guess what Poyer's looking for. I agree that he's been underpaid, but you pay contracts based on what you think you're going to get from players, right? You're paid contracts for what they're going to do, not what they've done. Again, 1 year older than Tyrann Mathieu. That's the deal that I can't get out of my head. I'm very fascinated to see where this all ends up. But while the Fitzpatrick deal for this 25-year-old safety is one thing, the comparable deal to me is Tyrann Mathieu. That's the player. What does Jordan Poyer have in his bag right now where he can have a conversation and say, I deserve more money than Tyrann Mathieu? It's very interesting. I hope to get a resolution here. Look, and I don't know if Tyrann Mathieu just took a discount to go to the Saints, but if so, why would he sign a 3-year deal? You want to go back home? He took a discount? I'm a little confused by all this. But if I'm Brandon Beane, I'm living in that Tyrann Mathieu deal. And maybe Jordan Poyer wants 15 a season, and you settle on 12.5, 13. But as we try to work through this and figure out where this is going, that's what comes to mind for me. So like I mentioned, the Bills are on break now until the end of July. We are not. Locked On Bills remains a 5-day-a-week podcast throughout the offseason. And I'm very, very excited about next week. This is kind of a special announcement. Next week on the podcast is Josh Allen week. The entire week is all about Josh Allen. Every show is going to have a unique angle to discuss Josh Allen. And I do want you to be part of it. Our Herd Mentality show next week will be Josh Allen takes comments and questions, and Josh Allen takes comments and questions only. If you sent in something else, that's fine. I'll save it for a future week. But next week, Josh Allen only. Tell me about what Josh Allen as the Buffalo Bills quarterback has meant to you and your fandom. Ask me hard questions about Josh Allen. Give me a spicy take about Josh Allen. Tell us your favorite Josh Allen memory. Tell us what your favorite thing is about Josh Allen. It's going to be a fun week. We're talking about 17 all week long. And so I would love your participation. Again, herd mentality next week, Josh Allen only. Would love to know what he's meant to you and your fandom. Send me hard questions about Josh Allen. Give us your spiciest Josh Allen takes. Share your favorite Josh Allen memory. Share your favorite things about Josh Allen. Make predictions. Let's have ourselves a week talking Josh Allen. And I know that this is a Thursday episode, so we still have tomorrow, but I wanted to go ahead and put this out there so you guys can start thinking and preparing and sending stuff in now so we can get organized and have an awesome week next week. Josh Allen week on Locked On Bills. Don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. I should probably tell you where you should send that stuff in, just in case you don't know. 2 spots. Twitter DM at the Joe Marino on Twitter. DMs are open. Shoot it to me there. Or you can send me an email, joe@thedraftnetwork.com. Those are the 2 ways you can send that stuff in. Please do it. Please come back tomorrow. Please make sure you're subscribed. Rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great day. And I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.